Hey, and we are the Coalition. We are at VR Industries in Warwick, Rhode Island. We just attended the, if you will, the grand opening, but I think most of us suspected, based on campaign themes, the economic development plan of one Ashley Kalus, your Republican candidate for governor. A couple of themes have been persistent in your campaign, and I like to talk about themes a lot, but let's talk about first corporate welfare, and then secondly, economic development. We live in a state where tax stabilization agreements, tax incremental financing, wave maker, bomb maker, whatever grants just seem to be everywhere. If I could paraphrase Oprah Winfrey, if you're connected, you get a grant, and you get a grant. No, you get a grant. Everybody gets a grant. Everybody gets a break. Everybody gets a deal. But ultimately, doesn't the existence of these pervasive deals, this corporate welfare at a grand scale, point out actually the ultimate failure of our existing system of taxation?
Yeah, and so what we see with corporate welfare or projects that change the nature of the overall business climate, so they lower taxes for a specific firm to make up for the fact that we're not competitive. What we see is you're using a program to correct in a small way a larger problem. So what we need to do as a state is become more competitive, because the reality is when you bribe businesses to come here, the economic output it evens out. We know this empirically, that over time it doesn't work well for building the sort of economy that we want. So yes, if you are artificially changing the business environment via corporate welfare in order for a company to decide to be here, what you are saying and signaling is that we are not competitive as a whole.
Economic development is the linchpin of virtually every campaign in America, and I'll credit you for among other things, not using the terminology well-paying jobs. If you've owned a business, and ultimately as a media company, I own a business in the state, you constantly hear that refrain about well-paying jobs, it makes you a little nutty. But at the same time, this is a state where, again, these tax incremental financing, the TSAs, all go towards attracting businesses that largely occupy the luxury space. A recent hotel development downtown, $2 million of this and that. The Superman building, allegedly a 30-year tax stabilization agreement, twice the rate of quote-unquote normal connected businesses. How can we expect to develop affordable housing if in fact we're doing everything possible to subsidize luxury retail, luxury hotels, and luxury, housing?
We need to have an economic development strategy that is broad-based. So, and I want to sort of back up. People don't want jobs, they want careers. Mm-hmm. And that is what we need to provide, is a path towards a fulfilling, a rewarding career. We do that through technical and training education, and we also do that by building an economy that is broad-based. So not just tourism. I think what you're saying is luxury hotels is a tourism economy is okay. But we also need to focus on building manufacturing. We need a version of Quonset in the north part of the state. Those sort of economic development ideas are what we need to be pursuing. I'm okay with developing tourism in the context of the blue economy, but we need to also have a broad-based economy.
There's a real growing fear in the state of a word that is complex, gentrification. In the northern part of the state, in Pawtucket, there's construction of a railroad station that'll have connections to Boston. There's this stadium development idea, which allegedly, at some point in time in the future, may or may not have, who knows, a luxury retail and luxury housing component to it, which is ultimately probably one of the reasons why they want to build it in the first place. All of this has the combined effect of driving up rents, limiting space for the construction of a housing market, even from the private sector. So I'm going to ask you a philosophical question. Who is economic development supposed to be for? The people who live here right now, which are Rhode Islanders, it's a mosaic. First generation Americans, some of them wealthy, some of them poor, a lot of complex housing issues. But who is economic development supposed to be for? The people who live here now? Those people? Us? Or the folks that ultimately vested interests would like to replace us with?
Well, I would say that economic development needs to be for everyone. And remember that our kids are leaving because they can't afford to stay here. So we need to have a strategy that looks to develop across the housing stock. So when you talk about luxury apartments, I think what we're saying is we don't have a competitive development process, because if it's only luxury apartments that are able to be developed from a financial perspective, we have a larger systemic issue with developing housing. And that's what I've been saying, is that we need a housing development plan, and we can't spend 4 years to get to a plan, like No Plan Dan. He has a plan to have a plan to have a plan. We need action, but we need to develop housing across the different housing types. That is why I've been very open about the fact that we do need to incentivize cities and towns to think about accessory dwelling units and conversion of single family homes to multifamily units. That is how we quickly are able to provide housing to our kids who want to stay but don't want to live with their parents anymore. I mean, that is the problem that we have in Rhode Island, is we have individuals that want to buy houses. There are no houses to buy, so they're forced to rent or to live at home. And because the rental market is so tight, the rents are out of control. This is something that has happened because we have not been building for the last decade. So we need to start the process of creating housing units, not just luxury housing units, but broad-based housing units. And the reason that we haven't done that is a lack of competitiveness. It is tied to the same question about corporate welfare and needing to basically create an artificial environment for one company to come. We need to create an environment so that all developers want to be here. There are different ways that we can do it. Even with affordable housing, we are missing out on the federal match for housing. The state can match federal funds for affordable housing, which we're not doing, in order to incentivize housing development. That is happening in Massachusetts. So where do you think developers of affordable housing are going? They're not coming here where there isn't a match. So we need to be competitive in that way as well.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. It's a beautiful autumn day to meet people and campaign in.
It's great. Thank you so much for being here.
No worries.